Lock in with me for a second, because what I am about to lay out on this table is not a beef update, it is not a diss track postmortem, and it is not another one of those recycled Instagram caption breakdowns floating around your Explore page. What 50 Cent just pulled on Rick Ross in the last 48 hours is something else entirely, and by the time you sit through every receipt, every screenshot, every mansion detail, every Tupac angle, every Eminem wrinkle, and every Airbnb rumor, you are going to walk away understanding why insiders across the industry are quietly saying that Curtis Jackson may have just executed the cleanest character demolition of his entire career, and that Rick Ross, whether he sees it yet or not, has been the one carrying the wrecking ball on his own back. Stay with me on this one, because if you thought this rivalry was cooling, if you thought FF had finally lost interest, if you thought the Curtis vs. Rosie saga had officially aged out of the algorithm after nearly 2 decades of jabs, memes, streaming battles, and boxing challenges, you have been reading the wrong chapter of the wrong book. Curtis is not done. Rosie is not safe. And what leaked, what got announced, and what got captioned in the last 48 hours has completely rewritten the temperature of hip-hop's oldest ongoing Cold War. This is not a small update. This is not a filler post. This is not a footnote. This is the pivot point that flips the entire conversation about who these two men are and where their legacies land in the next decade of the culture. Let me lay this out piece by piece, because the way the surface-level accounts are framing the story is not just incomplete, it is misleading in a way that borders on culturally irresponsible. Every big blog jumped straight to the Tupac headline. Every reaction channel jumped straight to the Eminem angle. Every gossip site jumped straight to the mansion drama. But almost no one, and I mean almost no one, is stacking these events in the correct order. Because when you place them on the timeline the way they actually occurred, what you are looking at is not a rap feud. What you are looking at is a psychological siege. Curtis Jackson is the architect. Rick Ross keeps handing him the blueprints. Every troll post lands sharper than the last. Every clapback from Rosie gets recycled by Curtis into fresh ammunition. And every single time the biggest boss steps into the ring to defend his image, he ends up trading his composure for another news cycle Curtis will milk for the next 6 months. Now let me set the table for anyone tuning in fresh, because you need the entire picture before the twist lands. This latest chapter reignited when Rick Ross rolled out a new album, a project he had been personally hyping for months, a project stacked with more than 20 features, a project he framed as his statement piece. A late-career declaration that the biggest boss still ran Miami and everything south of it. He walked into that release cycle with confidence, with billboards, with press stops, with the whole Maybach music aesthetic dialed up to cinematic. Then the first week tracking dropped, and, depending on which outlet you trusted, the number landed somewhere in the low 20,000s. That is not a soft opening. That is a public-facing wound. And Curtis Jackson, who has treated Rosie trolling as an actual creative discipline since roughly 2005, wasted 0 seconds pouncing. Within hours, the memes were out. Within a day, the reaction podcasts had lit their candles. Within a week, Rick Ross was trending for reasons that had nothing to do with the album's actual music. But here is the turn. Instead of clapping back with numbers, instead of firing a diss, instead of doing what any competitive rapper with something to prove would do, Rosie slid into a completely different lane. He started giving interviews about the long game. He started talking about longevity. He started dropping monologues about bot streams and artificial inflation, and how the new flex is keeping the catalog pure. His energy was that of a man saying, "I do not need to fight Curtis on his playing field, because I am playing a longer, bigger, quieter game." And in isolation, on paper, in the abstract, that framing actually worked for a portion of the culture. Ross fans repeated it. Ross fans quoted it. Ross fans printed it across their timelines like it was a mantra. But here is what Rick Ross underestimated. Curtis does not respect composure. Curtis weaponizes composure. The moment Rosie tried to float above the numbers conversation, Curtis zoomed in on every single luxury flex the man had ever posted online and started disassembling them one by one, on Instagram, in interviews. And in that trademark low-key laughing tone that always makes the target look angrier by comparison. It was surgical. It was patient. It was, honestly, funny to the outside observer even when you knew the man on the receiving end of it was almost certainly seeing red. The features got mocked. The rollout got roasted. The catalog got picked apart. And then, right when everybody thought the trolling had peaked, right when everyone assumed Curtis had run out of angles, the mansion entered the chat. And this is the moment my jaw genuinely hit the floor. Because Curtis Jackson went on Instagram and told his followers that the $100 million mansion Rick Ross had been photographing, filming, hosting tours in, and using as the centerpiece of his biggest boss branding was allegedly listed on Airbnb. Let that sit for a second. He said, in front of the entire hip-hop internet, that the crown jewel of Rick Ross's entire public image was, in his opinion, a short-term rental. He said that in essence everything is fake, not the music, not the features, not the streams, the house. The house Rosie has been building an aesthetic empire around for years. The property that has anchored countless magazine spreads, music videos, and Sunday morning cigar posts. You need to understand what happened there on a strategic level, because this is where Curtis Jackson's genius shows itself. He did not attack the music anymore. He did not go after the features. He did not chase the streaming numbers around in circles. He aimed directly at the aesthetic, directly at the brand, directly at the visual identity Rick Ross has spent nearly 20 years constructing. And in one Instagram caption, he tried to pull the ceiling down on the entire Biggest Boss mythology in a single line. Because if the mansion is a rental, then what does the palm tree in the driveway actually represent? If the mansion is a rental, then how much of the entire luxury persona is genuine and how much is a very expensive rolling photo shoot? Those are not rhetorical flourishes I am inventing for effect. Those are the exact questions that started rebounding across every hip-hop timeline within minutes of the post going live. Now to Rosie's credit, he absolutely did not swallow that shot in silence. He fired back, and he fired back with a swing that on paper looked devastating. He told the young hustlers, in that slow syrupy Miami cadence he has perfected, that if he wanted to sell 250,000 units in a first week, he could have played that game. He told them if he wanted 400,000 he could have bought that too, and cheap at that. He told them that the artists Curtis was propping up could not even show a palm tree in their front yard, while he was standing on $100 million estate. On any other night, against any other opponent, in any other decade, that clapback would have been the mic drop of the week. It would have been the headline. It would have owned the news cycle. But this is Curtis Jackson. And Curtis does not react. Curtis redirects. Curtis absorbs. Curtis studies. And then Curtis detonates. Because right when the culture was still chewing on the mansion volley, right when Twitter was still trying to figure out whether Rosie had accidentally rented his own house to himself, right when the timeline was tilting slightly back toward Miami, Curtis walked into a completely different interview and dropped what may end up being the single most surreal announcement of his entire post-music industry pivot. He looked into the camera, calm as a chess player 2 moves ahead, and let the world know that he has a brand new song locked and loaded for the upcoming Street Fighter movie soundtrack, and that this record features not just him, not just Eminem, but Tupac. Yes, that Tupac. The Tupac who has been gone nearly 3 decades. The Tupac whose voice is arguably the most protected sonic archive in the entire history of American music. Not a sample. Not a reference. Not a ghostly interpolation. An actual feature verse woven into the record. When the interviewer, understandably, kind of buffered in real time and asked whether this was one of those AI voice reconstructions everyone has been playing with, Curtis shut that down immediately. He made it plain that no artificial intelligence was used to conjure Pac's vocals. He explained that the Shakur estate approved the record, released previously unheard material for the project, and greenlit the full use. He said the song was crafted specifically as the theme for the Street Fighter film. He said the paperwork is real, the vocals are real, the process was collaborative, and the release is coming. And you could tell watching that clip that Curtis knew exactly how nuclear that piece of information was the second it left his mouth. Pause. Sit inside that image for a moment. Curtis Jackson. Eminem. Tupac. One record. For a Street Fighter movie. If that song delivers even half of what Curtis is teeing it up to deliver, we are looking at a cultural earthquake. We are talking about a headline that would swallow the entire month. Radio would rotate it. Streaming would push it. TikTok would soundtrack every fight scene edit with it. Kids who have never actually sat down with a Tupac verse in their lives would hear one for the very first time and think they were listening to something brand new. That is not a marketing beat. That is a generational event. Which loops us right back to Rick Ross. Because the second that announcement hit the timeline, Rosie had 100 different ways he could have played it. He could have stayed quiet. He could have congratulated the collaboration diplomatically. He could have expressed curiosity like the rest of us. He could have let the news breathe for 48 hours and reassessed his next move. Instead, Rick Ross grabbed his phone, opened Instagram, and swung what he clearly believed was a haymaker. He mocked the collaboration. He said Curtis was releasing a song with Eminem and a dead legend. He told the internet pack had been resting for 30 years and to let the man rest in peace. He mocked Marshall in the same breath. He told Curtis to put those G-Unit sneakers on the clearance rack and go do a Tony Yeo, Lloyd Banks remix. He laughed. He smirked. He filmed it in that laid-back Miami tone that has become his signature closing move. If you slow the clip down and study Rosie's face while he is filming, you can actually see the certainty of a man who is convinced he has just landed a knockout blow. But here is where the psychological warfare shows itself again, because Rick Ross did not attack the music. He did not attack the collaboration on artistic grounds. He did not attack the timing, the marketing rollout, the Street Fighter tie-in, or the technical craftsmanship. He attacked the concept of a legacy artist being featured on a modern record, which, if we are being honest with each other, is a swing that lands on absolutely no one. It does not land on Curtis, because Curtis did not make the decision alone. It does not land on the estate, because the estate has every legal and moral right to greenlight whatever project fits their long-term stewardship. And it does not land on the culture, because the culture is going to press play the moment that record drops, whether or not Rick Ross approves. Because Amy Shakur's carefully constructed legacy infrastructure, both during her lifetime and in the structure that has continued since, has been famously protective of Pac's archives. If, and this is a serious if, the estate really did clear this record, that is not a mere green light. That is a coronation. That is an anointment. And Rick Ross, in trying to shame Curtis Jackson for making the record, effectively found himself in the far more dangerous position of shaming the Shakur estate for approving it. That is not a shot at FF. That is a shot at the Shakur family's long-term legacy strategy. And that is a shot most seasoned veterans would never take casually, because you do not swing at that family in a public feud with Curtis Jackson while the entire internet is watching. You tracking this? Because it gets sharper. Because the moment Rick Ross ran his mouth about the Pac record, Curtis did exactly what he has been doing for 20 years. He pivoted. He did not defend the record. He did not explain the estate paperwork. He did not fight on Rosie's chosen ground. He picked up an entirely different weapon and swung it right back at the mansion. Because that is the choreography. That is the rhythm. That is the dance Curtis has been perfecting since the mid-2000s. Right after Rosie ran the Pac joke, Curtis doubled down on the Airbnb narrative. He essentially said, "Look at this fool giving open house tours through a mansion allegedly listed as a short-term rental." He essentially said everything is fake. And the internet, being the internet, went into full detective mode. Threads appeared. Screenshots multiplied. Real estate agents got tagged. Some accounts insisted the property genuinely was a rental. Others insisted it was Rosie's real home and Curtis was bluffing. And nobody could conclusively prove either version in the moment. Crucially, nobody had to. Because the damage was already done. That has always been the play. Curtis does not need to prove anything. Curtis only needs to plant doubt. Because once the doubt takes root, once the seed drinks water, once the audience begins asking the question on their own, the entire persona starts leaking oxygen. Every future mansion post from Rick Ross now carries a footnote. Every future flex now carries a whisper. Every future luxury photo now drags a comment section full of Airbnb jokes behind it. That is what Curtis has been engineering for 2 decades. He is not trying to beat Rick Ross in an argument. He is trying to compromise the audience's ability to take Rick Ross seriously. There is a canyon between those two objectives. You seen the architecture here? The layering is the story. Piece 1, album sales. Piece 2, feature bloat. Piece 3, rollout theater. Piece 4, mansion authenticity. Piece 5, Pac and Eminem collaboration. Piece 6, sneaker line versus sneaker line. Piece 7, the entire definition of what a genuine boss looks like in the streaming era. Every piece is a fresh tunnel drilled into the foundation of Rick Ross's public identity. And Rick Ross keeps swinging at whatever punch just landed, instead of stepping back and identifying the pattern behind the sequence. Now here is the part almost nobody in your timeline has flagged, and it may end up being the most damaging exchange in this entire chapter. Curtis Jackson, inside the same wave of trolling, slipped in one of the sharpest character-level jabs of the entire feud. He effectively reminded the culture that Rick Ross had, in his framing, thrown a black woman under the bus. Curtis called Rosalie out for allegedly making excuses about being removed from certain shows, and implied that Rosalie placed the blame on the creator of those shows. And then Curtis dropped the line that has been quietly ricocheting through group chats ever since. He said, "Be as loyal to the black woman as you have been to Eminem." He said she gave you thousands of episodes of visibility. He said the shows were her shows, the concepts were her concepts, and yet, in his version, Rick Ross used a black woman as the fall guy while draping himself in undying loyalty to a white male superstar. That is not a punchline. That is a character indictment. That is the kind of statement that follows a public figure into every future interview for the next decade. And Rick Ross, up to this point in the timeline, has not directly answered that specific accusation. Not on his stories, not in his podcast stops, not on his verses. He has deflected. He has pivoted. He has talked about longevity. He has talked about bots. He has talked about anything except that particular line. And in a moment like this, silence reads as confirmation whether it should or not. Moving further along, because we still have not touched the sneaker war, and I promise you the sneaker war is not the punchline you think it is. Rick Ross took a swing at the G-Unit sneaker rollout. He suggested those sneakers were destined for Costco. He said he preferred the Lloyd Banks version. He implied that the other G-Unit members did not even have real sneaker deals. And then, in his signature Miami style, he added a jab suggesting that with Freeway Ricky not happening anymore, Curtis could now focus on shoes. It was layered. It was clever. It had angles inside angles. And it almost worked. On the surface, that looks like a light pot shot. But when you zoom out, what Rosalie is doing there is genuinely fascinating, because he is trying to fight Curtis Jackson on the entrepreneurial battlefield. And historically, that is a battlefield Curtis has completely dominated. Vitamin water, effin' vodka, Sire spirits, horror film production, prestige television, power, BMF, ghost, force, boxing promotion, podcast networks, book publishing. Whether you love the man personally or roll your eyes at him, the receipts on Curtis Jackson's business resume are Ivy League case study material. So when Rick Ross tries to poke at Curtis on the entrepreneurial side, he is picking the one fight he is least likely to win in the eyes of the average business-minded fan. It is like challenging a shark to a swim contest inside the shark's own ocean. And Curtis, of course, understands this at a cellular level, which is why every time Rosie fires on the business side, Curtis fires back on the persona side. Rosie throws a sneaker jab, Curtis throws a mansion jab. Rosie throws a features jab, Curtis throws an Airbnb jab. Rosie throws a longevity monologue, Curtis throws a Tupac and Eminem announcement. Every exchange, if you actually chart it, is Curtis escalating the stakes. Curtis is not defending the same ground. Curtis is stepping up a floor every round. That is not luck. That is not accident. That is design. That is a man who has been doing this at the highest level for 20 years and understands at a molecular level what actually moves an internet audience from a scroll to a full stop. Here is where it flips one more time, though, because there is a rumor traveling underneath this story that I want to be responsible about. So let me be crystal clear that this is unverified, this is culture chatter, and this is not confirmed reporting. There are whispers that the Street Fighter soundtrack record, if it hits the way Curtis is teasing it, may end up being previewed at a major event in the coming weeks. If that turns out to be true, and again, then the timing of Rick Ross's Pac critique could not be worse. Because the moment fans actually hear that record with their own ears, the moment they hear a genuine Pac verse cutting alongside a fresh M verse and a Curtis verse over a cinematic, big screen Street Fighter instrumental, every other conversation in this feud instantly becomes background noise. The mansion debate becomes irrelevant. The album sales debate becomes irrelevant. The long game monologues become irrelevant. Because if that record lands the way Curtis is scripting it, it will be a generational cultural moment. And Rick Ross, on his own Instagram, on his own timeline of his own free will, has already publicly criticized it. Which means when the moment hits, he becomes the guy who tried to talk the culture out of celebrating it. And there is no more dangerous position in hip-hop than being the man who publicly bet against the moment everyone ended up loving. That is a career footnote you cannot scrub, no matter how many albums you drop after. Now let me sit with the other side of the table for a moment, because I do not want to be a person who picks a lane and refuses to see the other view. There is a legitimate, respectable, culturally sincere argument that some legends deserve to simply be left alone. There is a real argument that, even with estate approval, even with previously recorded material, even with family blessings, hearing Pac dropped onto a modern soundtrack for a video game movie feels, to a slice of the culture, like a compromise of the legacy. Those are fair positions. Those are defensible positions. That is part of why Rick Ross's Pac line resonated with a slice of the audience, because he tapped into a real, existing feeling, even if he tapped into it for the wrong reasons. But here is what Rosie seems to have missed. The strongest version of that argument does not arrive with a laugh track. It does not arrive with a Curtis punchline attached. It does not arrive from a rapper who has been in a public war with FF for over a decade. Because the moment the message is welded to the messenger's grudge, the moment the critique becomes a shot, the moment the concern becomes a clown emoji, the entire moral weight of the position evaporates. And that is Rick Ross's fundamental problem in this feud. He keeps having valid points. He keeps making them in unusable ways. He keeps carrying a real argument into the arena inside a broken vehicle. You with me? Because we are almost at the part where the whole picture snaps into focus. Almost at the moment where you finally see why Curtis Jackson has been laughing this entire time. If you go back and study his public playbook across the last 20 years, one pattern repeats with almost algorithmic reliability. Whenever Curtis is entering a new business phase, whenever a new film project is loading, whenever a new show is about to premiere, whenever a new venture is about to hit shelves, he provokes a beef. Not a random beef. A calculated beef. A beef with someone who has enough name recognition to trend, enough emotional volatility to respond, and enough audience overlap to guarantee eyeballs. Rick Ross checks every one of those boxes. He always has. Which is exactly why, out of every possible target on Curtis Jackson's radar, Rosie is the one he keeps returning to. Not because he cannot let it go. Because it works. Every single time it works. And this time, the timing lines up almost too cleanly. A new song is coming. A movie tie-in is coming. A soundtrack is being teased. Estate approvals are being announced. A Street Fighter release is on the horizon. Every headline, every troll post, every meme, every mansion joke, every Airbnb caption is another organic ticker at the bottom of the screen, keeping Curtis's name in every conversation right up until the record actually drops. Whether Curtis engineered that on purpose, whether it is instinctive muscle memory at this point, whether it is a hybrid of both, the outcome is identical. Rick Ross is providing free promotion for a project he has already publicly criticized. That is the paradox of engaging Curtis Jackson in this era. Every time you swing, you are also unintentionally holding up the poster for whatever he is about to release. Zoom out one more time, because I want you to see the full board, because this is not simply two veterans exchanging jabs. This is about how modern hip-hop celebrity actually functions in the streaming era. In the streaming era, the beef is the marketing. In the streaming era, The reaction is the rollout. In the streaming era, the Instagram caption is the press release. And whoever masters that landscape is the person who dictates the culture. Curtis has spent a decade mastering that landscape. Rosie has spent a decade underestimating it. And that gap right there is why we are where we are tonight. That gap is the whole story. If you leave with only one thing from tonight, take this. Never confuse composure with strategy. Rick Ross has composure. Rick Ross has cadence. Rick Ross has that unmistakable Miami boss aesthetic that reads like power in a still frame. But composure without strategy is only posture. And you cannot posture your way past Curtis Jackson. He will locate the crack. He will find the seam. He will surface the rental listing. He will surface the loyalty gap. He will surface the pack angle. He will surface the sneaker weak spot. He will lift whatever is closest to the surface into the light with a laughing emoji, and then he will do it again the next day, and the day after that. Until the target either responds emotionally and hands him more material or goes silent and hands him the appearance of surrender. And do not, I repeat, do not expect this feud to cool anytime in the near future. One Instagram post from either side is all it takes to reignite the entire loop. One podcast quote, one event photo, one leaked lyric, one misfired comment under the wrong post. And we are right back here, breaking down the next exchange, watching the next Airbnb joke, watching the next mansion clapback, watching the next pack reference, watching the next chicken wing punchline, watching the next long game monologue. This story does not have an ending. This story has episodes. And based on the pacing, we are at best mid-season, possibly earlier than that. Which brings me to the final thought I want to leave you with. Beneath all the memes, beneath all the trolling, beneath all the shots and countershots, there is a real question buried inside this feud. And it is a question every artist entering his veteran years is going to have to answer sooner or later. What does longevity actually look like when the numbers stop cooperating? Does longevity look like Rick Ross digging into the long game, leaning on his catalog, leaning on his lifestyle, leaning on his image? Or does longevity look like Curtis Jackson pivoting to Hollywood, pivoting to television, pivoting to franchise soundtracks, pivoting to horror, pivoting to boxing, pivoting to whatever medium keeps his name in the algorithm? Those are not small questions. Those are the exact questions every veteran currently in his 40s and 50s is asking himself right now, whether he says it out loud or not. There is no clean answer. Both models have defenders. Both models have critics. Both models have real-world receipts. But what we are watching in real time, on our screens, is the war between those two models being played out with two of the loudest personalities the genre has ever produced. And every joke, every jab, every mansion crack, every pack announcement, every Airbnb caption, every G-Unit sneaker punchline is really just a proxy skirmish in that larger philosophical war. That is what makes this beef sticky. That is what makes it refuse to die. That is why we cannot look away. Because it is not about Curtis. It is not about Rosie. It is about which version of veteran hip-hop success is going to define the next 10 years of the culture. Whichever man wins the narrative wins the blueprint. Whichever man wins the blueprint wins the next wave of artists trying to follow him. Here's the piece that keeps me pacing at night thinking about this whole thing. The thing Curtis Jackson understands that Rick Ross either cannot or will not accept is that in the modern attention economy, being talked about is more valuable than being right. Being trending is more valuable than being correct. Being unforgettable is more valuable than being universally liked. Curtis does not care if half the internet thinks he is petty. He cares that all of the internet is paying attention. And every single time Rosie comments, every single time Rosie posts a reaction, every single time Rosie dignifies a jab with a response, he is voluntarily walking into a room Curtis has already wired. That is the entire secret. That is the entire genius. Curtis Jackson is not fighting for the win. He is fighting for the narrative. And whoever controls the narrative controls the story, controls the algorithm, and controls the culture. Leave your read in the replies below. Do you think Rick Ross should have stayed silent on the pack record? Do you think Curtis has pushed the trolling past the line? Do you think the Airbnb mansion claim is real, Or is FF bluffing for engagement? Do you believe that Tupac verse actually sees the light of day, or does the estate quietly pull the plug once the culture pushes back too hard? Do you think Rick Ross ever recovers this narrative, or is the Biggest Boss brand permanently dented no matter what he drops next? Do you think this ends in a truce, a public reconciliation, or does it end the way most Curtis Jackson feuds end, with one man still posting memes years later while the other politely refuses to say the name in interviews? Whatever your read is, drop it. Let it breathe. Let the comment section debate it, because I read every single response, and half of my next breakdown always starts inside your replies. If you want the follow-up the second the next round of shots fires, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and turn notifications on, because when this next chapter drops, and it absolutely will drop, I do not want you finding out about it from a random blog with half the details. I want you finding out about it from me with all of them. Every receipt, every screenshot, every quote, every angle, every hidden layer nobody else is willing to walk you through. Take care of yourself, take care of each other, and I will meet you back here on the next one. One final receipt to leave you with tonight, because I want you walking away from this breakdown with the full weight of what is actually happening in front of us. Rick Ross has spent his entire career selling us a very specific fantasy. The mansions, the cars, the features, the chains, the cigars, the boats, the private jets, the palm trees, the Miami skyline, the Wingstop empire, the car show empire, the luxury real estate flexes. Every piece stitched together into a single cinematic mood board the culture bought into, printed as wallpaper, screenshotted for motivation, and repeated on podcasts as proof that hip-hop can build dynasties. And Curtis Jackson, tonight, is not challenging one piece of that mood board. Curtis is questioning the entire mood board. And every follow-up post from FIF is a fresh crack in the frame around it. Which is exactly why, when you rewind the tape and study every previous chapter of this rivalry, the pattern rhymes perfectly. From the record deal jabs, from the boxing challenges, from the streaming wars, from the podcast interviews, from the sneaker trolling, from the mansion Airbnb allegations, from the Pac and Eminem announcement. Every chapter follows the same choreography. Rick Ross builds a flex. Curtis studies the flex. Curtis finds a crack in the flex. Curtis posts about the crack in the flex. Rick Ross responds emotionally. Curtis uses the emotional response to launch the next flex takedown. And the loop keeps spinning, or at least until Rick Ross decides the arithmetic of engagement no longer favors him, which, based on everything we have watched this week, he has clearly not yet decided. So yeah, that is the tape. That is the receipt. That is the full breakdown. Do not sleep on the next 48 hours, because if Curtis drops even a single preview clip of that Street Fighter record, the entire game changes overnight. And if Rick Ross doubles down on the Pac critique after the preview drops, the culture might finally choose a side once and for all. Either way, buckle in, because this is Curtis Jackson versus Rick Ross, chapter whatever, and the season finale is nowhere in sight.